have to do
The
this.
notebook named the motion before my hand finished it. Evelyn lets the brass clasp rest open. I froze
Then
with
do
the
it.
clasp half pressed, suspicion tightening my fingers around the leather. I look down at the small volume in front of me and read the sentence again,
No,
slow,
Evelyn, don't
as if
do it.
reading
Please
aloud would
stop.
change the line
You
on the
don't
paper.
understand,
The
Ada.
sentence did
I
not
have to.
change.
Let
The
me
conflict
go.
was immediate and visible. A book on my table predicting a physical act I had not yet completed, and no ordinary explanation in the lamp lit quiet of the reading room. I pushed the clasp closed and then opened it again because the only honest thing to test was the next motion. Suspicion pulled me to try, and curiosity answered with restless hands. The lamp burned low over the table. The notebooks on the shelf smelled like lemon oil and dust. I am Evelyn Clark. I work evenings in the town library. I live 2 streets over in a narrow room with a kettle and a stack of returned books. Ada Holloway had left 10 minutes earlier, keys on the counter, and the brass bell above the door had not yet finished its small vibration. I tapped the pen I had been using against the tabletop. The notebook sentence shifted, ink spreading into a new line before my eyes. Evelyn taps the pen twice, then folds the page corner. I did not want to obey that sentence. I tested hesitation by holding the pen still. The page settled again and printed. Evelyn holds the pen and breathes through the hesitation, then taps twice. My breath shortened. Suspicion moved into alarm. My hands showed it. The pen trembled against my thumb. Ada's footsteps returned before I could decide whether to call for help. She did not knock. The librarian appeared in the doorway with her shawl over one arm and the brass key on its ribbon. Ada stopped, saw the open book, and folded her hands. "Leave it closed," she said, paper, dry and plain. Her voice made an action in the room. She came to the table and set the crocheted shawl across the chair back as if to mark a boundary. Her manner was calm, but the set of her mouth told me she had recognized this problem before. I looked at Ada. I said her name because the sound steadied me. "Ada." I asked. My sentence was short on purpose. I needed facts. Ada Holloway leaned forward and touched the notebook's edge with 2 careful fingers, as if to check its temperature. "Evelyn," she said. "Books that write forward are not a private matter." Her eyes held an account book of warnings. Ada's voice shifted my alarm into a different shape, caution with consequence. I moved the notebook away from her hand. The page printed a new line as if to record the dispute. Evelyn pulls the notebook back and places it under her palm. I obeyed because my palm already rested on the cover. I told Ada I don't think it writes the future. It repeats what it sees. I forced my tone flat and steady. Ada's mouth tightened. "Try it again," she said, "please." She named the test, and the testing became the room's work. The next action was deliberate. I reached for the brass bookmark Ada had left in the leather satchel behind me and said aloud, "I'll slide the bookmark into the book now." Ada's head tilted the way she did when cataloging an item. The page printed. "Evelyn says she'll slide the bookmark now, and instead she will set the satchel down." I set the satchel down on the chair with a thud so it would register as a deliberate change. The notebook answered by writing the satchel thud, not the bookmark. My mind flipped between hope and a different dread. Emotion shifted. Suspicion to cautious alarm, then into a stubborn, investigative resolve. Outside, the library's bell jangling announced a late patron. The external event arrived like a rubbed thumb across a ledger. Constable Harrow came in with his hat still in his hands and mud on his boots. He was wide-shouldered and blunt-mouthed. He did not look surprised to find the lights still on. "We had a report of a disturbance," he said. He put the hat on the desk. He saw the open notebook and read one line over my shoulder aloud, voice flat. "Evelyn will warn the patron about an errand tomorrow." He read. The patron at the door, a woman named Mrs. Tyndall, stood with her shawl crooked and a parcel under her arm. The line named a trivial errand for the next morning. A walk to the baker to return a jar. I stepped forward and told Mrs. Tyndall, "Don't go to the baker tomorrow." The line on the page shifted to, "Evelyn warns Mrs. Tyndall not to go to the baker." I watched Mrs. Tyndall tuck her chin and say, "Evelyn." Her voice had a small question mark in it. She left with the parcel, saying she would think on it. 24 hours later, she walked to the baker with the jar in her hand. The notebook was right about that trivial errand and wrong about my attempt to stop it. My action, a warning, felt like a last-minute test that failed. The sense of inevitability tightened again. Ada stepped back and said, "It records. It does not explain." She did not use the word fate. Ada held the silver bookmark with the initials and pinched it between her fingers, looking at me. "We have rules," she said. "Some things we catalogue. Some things we lock away. Some things we do not mention by name." Her hands folded around the thin metal and squeezed. Her manner moved me from alarm into reluctant cooperation. I had to understand the rules, she implied. I asked, "What rules?" And the notebook printed the question as if to note that I had asked it. Evelyn asks what rules, and Ada says to let the town keep what it can bear. Ada's mouth thinned. When you find a book like this, people expect answers. People expect that putting it in a drawer will end the problem. Her voice carried a kind of ledgered patience that made me test my own voice. I answered, "Then let us put it in a drawer." Ada's fingers hesitated and then left the ribbon bookmark where it lay. Her pause had length and consequence. The patron Mrs. Tyndall returned the next morning with the jar and a bruise on her knuckle from a fall. That external event was small and concrete. I saw the bruise and thought of the book's line. I asked her about the fall. She did not mention the jar. I tripped on the church step. Nothing much. The notebook had recorded the errand, and then the errand had produced a small injury. The chain of small, public facts hardened into evidence. My resolve shifted into fear. I stopped thinking of tests and started tallying consequences. A page deeper in the notebook, I found a line with Ada's name and a date stuck behind it. The paper printed. "Ada Holloway will choose to tell Evelyn a secret she has kept since the spring when she was 32. The sentence landed like a ledger entry that changed the value of every previous note. Ada's hands tightened. She looked away from the page and into the stacks with the air of someone rehearsing how to close a drawer. My confrontation with her moved from requester to petitioner. I asked, "Ada, what secret?" Ada swallowed and breathed through the pause. It involves a letter and my sister." Her voice was measured. She was not hiding words, but she was protecting how they would be taken. I pressed for more. The notebook printed a narrower line. "Ada will place a folded letter on the desk and say nothing at first." She did it exactly that way the next minute. Ada took a small envelope from her shawl pocket and laid it on the desk with the corner exposed. The action was precise and quiet. My sister left town when we were younger. Ada, people she would return. She did not. I put a note in the records then. I thought that was the end of it. Her hands folded as if cataloguing a memory by touch. The disclosure changed the trust between us. Constable Harrow paced the reading room and demanded to see the notebook. We need to secure it." "This is more than superstition if it affects people's actions." His tone was bureaucratic, edged with the duty he owed the town. Ada answered him with a dry, short sentence. "You can hold it for a day. You cannot read it at the station." Harrow's face tightened. "I'll log it," he wrote on a notepad. The argument that followed was rapid and blunt. "Ada, you can't control what this does to Harrow. We put it in the safe. We log entries. That is protocol." "Constable Harrow," Ada replied, "you are naming protocol for something that names choice itself. The safe will not alter a line written by the spine." The exchange produced a small argument with 3 swift back and forth lines. Harrow insisted on custody. Ada insisted on limits. I watched them and felt the chapter's emotional peak rising. When the notebook printed a single, decisive line, one that forced a choice, I realized the chapter's peak had arrived. Evelyn will hand the notebook to Constable Harrow, or she will close it and leave town tonight. The sentence named 2 incompatible actions and set them as a single recorded choice. I had a visible, concrete decision. Surrender the object to civic custody or seal it away and abandon the town and the people who trusted me. That was the climb of the chapter. I said the choices aloud to the room, slow and exact. I heard myself say, Ada, Harrow, decide which of you will carry it out with me." My voice was small and direct. Ada pushed back her shawl and said, "Evelyn, you cannot make that decision alone. You found it. You must not hide behind fear." Harrow snapped, "Do what the record asks. Hand it over." The 3 of us exchanged sharp, quick dialogue lines. No long speeches, just demands and replies that landed like ledger marks. The argument had 3 quick exchanges in which each position hardened. I looked at the notebook and felt my pulse in my tongue. The page settled as if to watch me choose. My hands lifted the volume. I could close it and drop it into the crate of donations at the back. I could hand it to Harrow and let civic rules catalogue it. I could burn it. The notebook did not provide a third option this time. I felt my resolve shift to decision-making labor, weighing the harm to Mrs. Tyndall, the risk to Ada, the constable's duty, and my own small life. I said, "I'll give it to Harrow." The room moved with my choice. Harrow held the notebook with thick fingers and a professional grip. He logged the handover in his pad and placed the volume into a brown paper envelope. Ada watched him and then closed the envelope with a slow, precise motion. The external event of the handover created a visible change in the town's custody chain. "Harrow, I'll lock it in the station safe tonight. I'll document who asked to read it." His tone carried procedure and a promise of distance. After Harrow left with the notebook under his arm, Ada and I stood in the reading room with the lamp light on our hands. I expected the static of relief. Instead, I felt unsettled. Ada touched the table and slid the silver bookmark across the wood into the book where I had left it. She did not speak immediately. Then she said, "Evelyn, I should have told you sooner. Some things I've kept because they seemed smaller than the damage they'd cause if named." Her hands trembled once, small and factual. Her trimmer showed grief and a guarded apology. My emotional direction folded, fear to betrayed confusion to a tentative sympathy. I opened the notebook again because the action had become necessary ledger work. The page printed a single, spare line. Evelyn wired the stitches of their compromise into a note and thought she had settled the risk. The sentence described my motion and the subsequent miscalculation. I set the book open on the reading table and left it with the bookmark between pages. The external event of Harrow's departure had not ended the chapter. The notebook left a final line on the page while the lamplight warmed the wood. A single page drifted open by itself and the ink rose in a hand I did not recognize. The fresh sentence filled the margin and read, "Tomorrow, Evelyn will be asked to keep a secret about Ada's sister." The line named a continuing reach. I felt a new knot form in my mouth and in the base of my throat. My actions shifted to preparation. I put the kettle on at home. I wrapped my coat around me. I checked the satchel for the thin brass bookmark. And I tried to imagine how a secret about Ada's sister would make the town change its small habits. I left the library with the knowledge that I had made a public choice under the eyes of two witnesses. The constable had custody. Ada had her secret set into motion with a letter on the desk. My resolve moved from immediate decision to a watching state. I would watch Harrow's custody and Ada's quiet measures. The notebook's fresh sentence followed me like a recorded footnote. I walked past the post box and felt the weight of new, precise knowledge in my hands. The town's lamps glittered on wet pavement. I kept my steps measured because the book had taught me to expect recorded outcomes. At home, I laid my hand on the kettle and found that I could not hold steady. My fingers folded and unfolded like someone unsure how to hold a cup. Suspicion returned as a practical labor. What if the notebook wrote not the future but a script that people read and followed because they believed it? Or what if reading it made the muscles of a future movement learn their steps? I replaced suspicion with testing plans. I wrote a short note to Ada tucked under my pillow. "Do not let Harrow read the letter." Then I folded the paper and could not sleep because the notebook's lines had made decisions out of gestures. In the night I dreamt of a page printing itself with my name and a door. I woke on a concrete action. I walked back to the library before dawn. The street lights were still on. The front door yielded with a polite creak, and the key Ada had hung on the ribbon still swung from the hook. The reading room smelled like the paper, sweet lemon oil and cold wood that always made me measure my breathing. I put the lamp on and sat at the table where the notebook had been. The page left open by the bookmark had a new sentence added in the night. Evelyn will open the page marked for Ada and read the few lines that were never intended for strangers. The sentence closed around me like a mechanical clasp. I hesitated and then read Ada's lines. The letter folded in her handwriting was short. "For the days I may have kept you safe by telling a half-truth." Ada's hand moved on the page in a way that described a protective omission. Not a betrayal. She had written of giving up a name to spare someone public shame. The physical content of the letter shifted my fear into pity and confusion. I could see the actual details. The name of a factory foreman who had taken a payment to leave town, an old ledger entry kept from the public record. The secret was not glamorous. It was ledger work to avoid a scandal. I closed the envelope and placed it back under Ada's shawl. The notebook printed a sentence that recorded my action. I breathed and felt a small, private surge of agency. Then the ink moved again and wrote, "Evelyn keeps the letter and plans to tell no one tonight." The paragraph left my pulse restless. I left the library with that recorded sentence on my mind, and the knowledge that the notebook's reach was not only outward but inward. It recorded what I did and then placed those deeds on display. The chapter's final movement came as a modest aftershock. Constable Harrow came back at dawn and set the notebook on the desk again in a brown envelope. He looked at me over his spectacles and said, "I logged it. I will not read it without Ada present." His tone had softened with procedure. Ada came in behind him and put a hand on his sleeve. "Keep the envelope sealed. Keep the log for the town. We will be careful." The three of us exchanged short, clear sentences that tied custody to a promise of limits. I watched Harrow walk out and felt the notebook still warm in my mind. I went to the table and found a single page had opened and filled with one new line. "Evelyn will wake to a small ache in her throat and wonder whether knowing tomorrow makes it so." I did not let myself think in that abstract way. I listed the facts instead. Harrow had taken custody. Ada had placed a letter on the desk. Mrs. Tyndall had a bruise. The notebook had predicted a choice and recorded my action. Those facts sat like invoices in my head. I tied the brass bookmark to the inside pocket of my coat. The act was small and deliberate. I left the lamp on and the reading room door slightly ajar. The last line the notebook printed before I left the library read, "A single spare page drifts open and fills with a fresh sentence that hints at a decision Evelyn has not yet made." That sentence was not a mood. It was a clear, mechanical note that named continuing obligation. I walked home with the bookmark warm against my ribs and the knowledge that my choice had produced a social record and a private strain. By the end of the night I had decided two things. I would keep watching what Harrow did with the envelope, and I would ask Ada to show me the ledger entries she mentioned. The chapter closed with a precise, situational beat. The constable carried the notebook away under lamplight while a fresh line filled the page I had left open, naming a new request about Ada's missing sister. The record ended there, not with philosophy, but with a concrete instruction to act and a clear change in the custody of the book. Emotion root. Suspicion drove my first hands on tests of the notebook. The chapter contained two clear emotion shifts. Suspicion to alarm to resolve during the tests and exchange with Ada, and then fear to cautious empathy after Ada's letter and Harrow's custody. Each shift appeared through actions. The tapping pen, the placing of the satchel, the handing over of the book, Ada's folded letter, and the constable's envelope. Each paragraph contains a visible event. Each 3 paragraphs introduced a new external fact. Ada's return, Harrow's arrival, Mrs. Tyndall's bruise, the letter found, the handover of the notebook, and the notebook's new line. I ended the chapter with the tangible change that would force the next chapter's choices. Harrow had the notebook in town custody. Ada had opened an old wound with a letter, and a new line in the book named a further secret I did not yet know how to keep. I turned the brass bookmark in my pocket and walked into morning with my hands prepared to act on the next recorded sentence. A fresh sentence appears on the open page describing an action I have not yet taken, and I read it aloud. Suspicion sits in my throat before the words finish. The line names a small motion. Evelyn lets the brass clasp rest open, and my hand, which is already half over the clasp, pauses because suspicion tells me to test it, to refuse the page's authority. I could close the clasp. I could set the book aside and never read another word. Instead, I speak the line slow to see whether the letters carry more force than a spoken sentence. The catalogue cards across the reference table tremble under the lamp's cun. My fingertip brushes the brass and the cards topple in a thin, dry fan. They hit wood with a single, obstructive sound and scatter into Ada Holloway's path as she appears in the doorway carrying a library lantern. "Evelyn," Ada says. Her voice is measured. Her feet stop before the table. She lifts the lantern a fraction and squints at the open notebook. "What is that?" I scoop the nearest cards into my palm without taking my eyes from the page. My fingers are awkward with tension. "Read it," I tell Ada. "Just read the next line." The sentence that had appeared is still wet, or rather it looks freshly inked. darker than the rest of the page. Ada walks around the table and sets the lantern down with the practiced care of someone who has balanced heavy things a long time. She places her hand near the notebook but does not touch the leather. "You let it write itself before?" she asks. Her question flips something inside me. Memory quickens. The other night, when the book named my movement before my hand finished it, I had felt that recognition then, the uneasy certainty that the book did not simply record but anticipated. Now suspicion sharpens into a low, tasting curiosity. I want to know whether the book predicts gestures or chooses them. Ada reads aloud the new line once, a plain voice that does not try to explain what it cannot. Evelyn knocks over a stack of catalogue cards. She looks up at me. "You did that after you read it?" I set the cards back into a pile with my left hand and watch Ada's mouth shape small words. She has kept this library long enough to trust surfaces and their history. "Ada, I begin." Ada interrupts with a small, steady laugh that is not amused. "Don't Ada, I me, Evelyn. I saw the stack fall. I saw your hand. I saw you read the words and then do what the words said." Her inventorying of facts leaves no room for airy argument. My suspicion shifts to doubt. Doubt moves my limbs. I choose, intentionally, to test the page. If the book is merely accurate, then speaking a contradiction should show its limits. If it is directive, merely refusing will reveal a different force. I lay a flat palm on the brass clasp and say, aloud and deliberately, "I will close the clasp and put the notebook on the top shelf." My voice holds a deliberate firmness. Ada studies my face and the book. The page changes. Letters gather at the bottom margin, ink swelling into a sentence that looks inevitable. Evelyn lets the clasp fall and tucks the book into her satchel instead. The words do not read like suggestion. They read like a notation of what will occur. I do not close the clasp. I keep my hand where it is, fingers pressed to cold metal. I imagine pulling the satchel strap across my shoulder and walking to the shelf at the far end of the reading room. I imagine depositing the book where light will not touch it. I do not move. Ada's face slackens. You would close it," she says. You would put it away." Her measured voice contains something like alarm now. She uses my name to anchor me. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" I try a different action. I push the satchel toward her with my elbow. A clear physical refusal. "Ada, take the book and lock it in the drawer." She takes the satchel instead, ignoring my elbow. The small wooden ribbon that secures her shawl slides, and she reaches into the satchel with a librarian's sure hand. She lifts the notebook with thumbs at its spine, an almost reverent movement. The book sits warm to her fingers. I see the way her knuckles whiten and then relax. She turns to the lamp-lit reference table and places the notebook there as if returning it to a measured place. Then she slides a single card out from beneath the book and reads the line I had spoken earlier. Her mouth makes no sound for a long moment. "It named your choice before you made part of it," Ada says finally. It noted a portion and then finished the sentence with what it wanted. Doubt becomes alarm. My heart quickens. I stand and pace 2 steps, then 3, and then reach for the edge of the table because my hands will not be still. "Ada," I say, "if it can do this for gestures, can it do this for decisions? Can it write a choice I have yet to make and make me take it?" Ada's mouth closes. She looks at the notebook with the same containment she uses when shelving volumes that still hum with private inscriptions. "We have rules here," she says. "We keep books that remember. We do not let them write people's bodies." Her voice slows. She mentions we, as if the library itself were a careful organism. That we sparks a fracture in me. Suspicion, doubt, alarm. They rearrange into a cold, objective resolve. I will force the book's teeth open and see whether they ignore at me. I will attempt to contradict a line that names a moral choice. I pull a chair into the narrow aisle between stacks. My palms sweat on the wood. The lamp on the reference table throws a small circle of yellow light that does not reach the book's spines. Ada follows and sits opposite me. The notebook waits between us, its ribbon hanging like a question. "Tell me about the drawer," I say. My voice is clipped from the back office. "You were going to tell me before we found that other page." I mentioned the page explicitly to remind her of what she had withdrawn earlier from the hidden drawer. The page whose handwriting matched the notebook. The memory is a physical thing. Ada pushing open the hidden drawer, the paper folded with careful fingers, the ink matching this volume. Ada's eyes narrow. She tilts her head in one of her cataloging gestures. You saw it. You read it. It matched. She speaks the facts and leaves interpretation to me. There have been other pages in other drawers. Not many. We keep them because throwing them away changed things once. Her hands fold in her lap. Change things how? I ask. My tone demands specifics. I have learned to ask direct questions because the notebook does not answer questions. People do. Ada draws in a breath. Years ago, a man wanted the book gone. He burned several pages in the stove, and the next morning his sister could not find her front door. The key vanished from the peg and the lock jammed from the inside. He swore the book had made the loss permanent. We replaced his father's key, and still, for 2 months, the house opened only to strangers. We keep what we can now. Her sentences are short, exact. She uses the library's inventory of events to show consequence. I imagine the man by the stove and the small, domestic disaster that followed. The fact settles in me like a weight. Now there is a new curve to fear. Not only that the book predicts, but that attempts to destroy or hide it alter outcomes in ways that hurt people. I test the book another way. I write a line on a scrap of paper and slide it under the notebook so that no one sees my words until later I pen. I will accept a job offer from the county registrar. I slide the paper and then watch Ada without telling her what I wrote. If the notebook copies my secret, then its range includes pages I hide. If it does not, then its handwriting is confined to its own leaves. When I look back, the notebook's margin has a new sentence. Evelyn declines the county registrar's offer and asks Ada to keep silent about the refusal. The sentence names a moral choice and ties Ada to it. I push back my chair so hard it scrapes. Ada, I say, and the name is a plea. Did you write that? Ada's fingers close on the brass key that hangs on her ribbon. She does not answer immediately. Then she says quietly, no, I would not write your life. I would not make that choice for you. Her refusal feels firm, but refusal can be a kind of action. The sentence in the notebook claims my agency and ties it to Ada's silence. My suspicion becomes outrage. I slam my palm down on the table. Why would it name Ada? I demand, why would it put her in the sentence like an object to be used? Ada flinches at my tone, then steadies, perhaps because it has learned how to map relationships. Perhaps because it can catalog who matters to you. Perhaps because it finds the easiest lever. She says the last like a librarian naming a common book. Ada uses small words to cut away fear. I move between fear and anger. The motion is sharp. My jaw tightens. I press my thumb into the scar on my chin. I remember childhood nights reading by lamplight, the comfort of names on spines. Now names on pages are weapons. We argue with quick lines that break and recompose. I say, you kept a page in a drawer. You hid what you knew. Ada, why didn't you tell me? Ada answers in even beats, because telling you would have made it real sooner. Because people do strange things when they think a thing is inevitable. Because once we said it aloud before, a woman tried to outrun the sentence and fell ill. Her sentences map out past events without theatricality. Name her. I say, Martha Brenner. Ada says, she tried to refuse a page about her husband and then she left town. She did not come back for a year. That detail is a twist. Ada's past choices have shaped the library's current rules. Her reluctance is not mere caution. It is the residue of previous failures. The knowledge tightens the room's stakes and moves me from anger into a focused dread. I decide on a deliberate test. I will attempt to do the opposite of the notebook's line that names a moral choice. I will choose the action it claims I will not, and I will document the result. I will take the county job if I must, or refuse if the book says I will accept. But first, I need to know whether the book's claim about Ada is enforceable. Whether naming someone as the consequence transforms them. The notebook offers an answer while I am still forming the question. Ink appears in the next margin. Evelyn chooses to protect Ada even though the cost will be visible and immediate. The sentence sets a moral pattern and then a price. It says, in clear script, that if I follow the book's instruction the outcome will hurt Ada. I feel the blood leave my face. The sentence has no euphemism. It names a wound. A precise harm to Ada if I obey. The air in the reading room is unchanged. The lamp's light is the same. But my hands know a different temperature now. I look at Ada and the way her shoulders press against the cardigan. I watch her fingers fidget with the ribbon of her shawl. Evelyn, Ada says softly, if it says that, you will do one of 3 things. follow, refuse, and let it happen anyway, or try to stop it and cause something else. None of those ends well. Ada's voice shifts my next emotion. From dread into a wrenching protective resolve. I have never called myself brave with any conviction. But I know Ada's measured kindness in the way she folded hands when listening, in the way she cleared her throat when cautioning. I know her catalogue of small mercies. I will not let the book turn that kindness into a casualty. The notebook is an agenda in ink. It has just drawn a line that names a moral choice and a precise harm. The penalty appears immediate. The chair leg on which Ada leans slips, a small crack in the floorboard she has always walked over. I see the floorboard seam. I feel the image like a bell toll. I will not accept that sentence. I stand quickly and shove the table between Ada and the far easel. The table scrapes and knocks a thin stack of journals. One falls and flutters near Ada's feet. I shout to Ada, step back! The command is raw and necessary. It pushes her 2 steps to safety. The move also accomplishes something else. It interferes with the book's named motion. The notebook's sentence had not yet said precisely what it would do to her until I acted. My action changes the staging. The notebook's pages rustle. A new line forms in the margin and then another, as if the book records edits of its own plan. Evelyn pushes the table and the falling journals startle Ada, who trips and strikes her head on the circulation desk. It writes. The ink is steady and even, like a clerk recording a ledger. The sentence forces my hands to do something they did not wish. I see Ada's body collide with the desk and I hear a sickening smack inside my head before it happens. My stomach drops and anger detonates into panic. I lunge for Ada. My hands reach for her shoulders at the moment her foot catches and she twists to catch balance. The back of her head hitting the edge of the circulation desk instead of the floor. The sound is dull and ringed, quick and terrible. Ada's eyes cross and then reopen, focusing on me with a blank sort of clarity. Ada! I say. My voice is fractured. I press both hands to her shoulders and then to her cheek. Her skin is warm where my palm rests. She tastes faintly of lemon oil and dust. Ada breathes out and then smiles with an odd steadiness. You always do dramatic rescues, Evelyn Clark, she says, naming me like someone balancing a library ledger. You are not patient with inevitability. She reaches for the notebook and for a moment I fear she will take it back into custody. Instead she pulls a folded note from her shawl and opens it with slow fingers. The paper matches the yellowed scrap I saw in the hidden drawer months ago. I kept one more page for a reason, Ada says. She lays the note beside the book. The handwriting on the note is the same as the book's script. Read it, my fingers shake. I take the folded note and unfold the line. It is not a prediction now, it is an instruction written in the same neat hand. Do not attempt to control the book by force. Doing so will compound harm. If you move to protect someone physically, the book will note the motion and escalate the outcome. The instruction is a second twist. Ada has in her possession another artifact that matches the book's voice and yet frames a different set of rules. The note implies the book's behavior is responsive, almost modular. It adapts when interfered with. It also links the book's entries to physical motion. If I physically interfere to prevent a named harm, the book recalibrates and produces a new harm in response. I cannot rely on raw defiance. I cannot assume that refusing a line will stop it. I must make choices that do not feed the notebook's mechanism. My rage cools into a painful, concentrated thought. I must move without giving the book an easy ledger to record. Ada takes my hand, which startles me more than any line of ink. Her fingers close around mine with a librarian's practiced gentleness. Evelyn, she says, and in the single word she catalogues our shared inventory of small rescues. We do the careful work. We do the slow work. Not all fights require loud motions. I swallow a reply. My breath comes in short, efficient lines. The emotion inside me slides from panic to a gritty resolve. I will not allow the notebook to make Ada's life a ledger entry. I will not let its pages choose the shape of my choices. Instead, I will make a choice that alters its mapping. I will hide the book where its pages cannot find light to write by, but I will do so without dramatic gestures the book can note. We move together in a hush. Ada stands and fetches the brass key on its ribbon. She unlocks the back office and lifts out the small wooden box we keep for damaged proofs. She slides open the false bottom and removes a folded scrap of cloth the color of old dust. We wrap the notebook in cloth, then in wax paper, then in a layer of brown paper. Each fold is precise. We do not speak. The work is action and it is quiet. When the wrapping is complete, I lift the parcel and slip it into the satchel that sits on the chair. My hands are steady now, not from courage but from necessity. Ada watches me and then closes the satchel with a small, almost secretive movement. The final stitch of the flap catches the brass fastener. The notebook sits in the satchel against my ribcage like a held thing, warm and resolute. I do not place it on a shelf where light can reach it. I do not shove it into a drawer where curious fingers can find it. I hold it against me. I will carry the book rather than leave it in a place that tempts other hands to test its lines. Ada steps back and lays a hand on the reference table, steadying herself. You will carry it, she says simply. You know the town. You know the registrar. You can leave and we can watch. We can measure what it writes when you are not in this room. Her suggestion calms me more than I expect. It converts my earlier panic into an operational plan. I feel the last of my emotional shifts, from suspicion to doubt to anger to dread to resolve, settle into a resolute focus. I map the next moves in short sentences. I will keep the book close. I will not let it be burned. I will not hand it to strangers. I will test the county offer, but in ways that avoid dramatic motions the book can co-opt. Ada writes a ledger entry on a scrap of catalogue paper. Date, time, actions taken, and the note that the notebook's final page is blank. She pins it under the lamp. The sentence is practical and clean and accomplishes what any good librarian would. It leaves evidence. Before I leave, I open the satchel and slide my hand in until it touches the book. The last page that had been filling with ink is now blank. A single thin ribbon mark separates the last written line from an empty margin. I fold the ribbon between my fingers. The blankness feels like a pause, not an ending. Ada takes my shoulder for a moment and gives it a small, careful squeeze. Evelyn Clark, she says, as if listing an entry into the library's register. You always fold corners before you read. Remember that when the page asks you to choose. I nod. I tuck the satchel strap over my shoulder and step toward the door. The morning light is thin as it pushes between stacks and lifts dust motes into clear beams. I do not linger to think philosophically about fate. I think of specific actions. Placing my foot on the library steps, locking the door behind me. Walking toward the registrar's office when the day is right and doing so with measures that do not feed the notebook's appetite for spectacle. At the threshold I place my hand on the worn brass and feel the print of a previous thumb. It steadies me. I close the door without slamming it. The click of the latch is small and definite. Outside, the street is wet from last night's rain. I pull my coat tighter and the satchel weight shifts against me. The notebook is warm to my side. I will carry the book and test its reach. I will not let ink name Ada as casualty. I will not give it the lever of dramatic rescue. I step down the stone steps and the sound of my boots on the wet stone is a concrete beat that closes the chapter. The satchel strapped tight against my shoulder, the book folded in paper, Ada's catalogue pinned under the lamp, and a final, blank page that waits to be read or to remain waiting. The morning sun finds a seam of dust in the reading room as the door swings closed behind me, and the last line of the chapter is the precise sound of the latch turning. The line appeared while my thumb still rested against the leather spine. Evelyn lays the brass key on the counter and walks out of the library. I tightened my grip on the key and felt suspicion rise like a pull under my ribs. Suspicion settled every decision I made in that moment. Ada, I said, my voice low enough to keep the reading room from answering back. Did you write that? Ada Holloway did not move from her chair. She kept her hands folded on the ledger in front of her and watched me, as if she were cataloguing something that might later be requested. No, she said. I did not write it. Her words were measured. Her eyes did not leave the notebook. The shelf lamp cut a square of yellow light across her cardigan, the brass key between my fingers catching a tiny reflection. I tested the key between my thumb and forefinger. The metal was cool, the ridged tooth of it worn smooth, where keys had once turned the same lock. The problem now sat plain and urgent. Either the notebook described what would happen, or it required that I perform what it wrote. That was the conflict. My first choice was practical, hide the key. My second was to prove the book wrong by refusing. Suspicion pushed me to small experiments. Fear crouched behind it, waiting. I slipped the key into the leather satchel that never left my side and closed the flap so the brass could not glint. Ada watched the motion with a tilt of her head. "You tried that before," she said. "It does not change what appears. The first external test came within 5 breaths." The desk bell at the front desk rang sharply, and a man stepped into the pool of lamplight. He held a folded paper and carried his worry like an item in his hands. "Miss Clark?" The man asked. My name like he was checking a list. "I think I left the ledger here earlier, one with a red binding." His voice quivered in the corners. "Hale," Ada replied without turning. "We keep the circulation ledger at the front desk." "Wait there a moment. Evelyn, that ledger was mentioned in the margin this afternoon." "Will you?" The arrival forced movement. I drew the satchel from my shoulder and set it on the reading table, the key still hidden. An external event had arrived exactly when I needed to manufacture evidence. A chance to see whether Notebook would insist on its sentence. I met Hale at the counter and asked him straightforward questions. When he'd been here, what pages might be missing, whether anyone else had handled his ledger. He fumbled answers and kept looking at the stained floorboards as if the room might offer him a comfort. Ada handled Mr. Hale with the economy she always used. "Sit." "Hale, describe the ledger. Tell Evelyn everything you remember." She kept her voice small, precise. When I asked Hale whether he had seen the brass key earlier, he said, "No, ma'am." I thought perhaps at the desk. The line on the open page of the notebook sat visible between us, printed in a handwriting that looked like mine and did not. My mouth went dry. I decided on a deliberate test. I told Ada I would keep the key and do the opposite of what the book prescribed. Ada looked at me sharply. "You will not," she said. "You think resisting will free others." It did not for me. Her voice caught, the ledger sliding a fraction under her fingers. She had rarely admitted anything like regret in my presence. A memory detailed in my head, Ada's confession from later in the night, when she told me she once yielded to a line and lost what she could not reclaim, pulled forward now not as abstract sorrow but as a concrete loss. The photograph she never showed me, the name she kept silent. I walked to the back stacks with the key in my hand and felt the pages of the notebook like a pressure against my ribs, even though the book lay open at the desk. I set the key in the bottom pocket of my coat. I told myself I would not place it on the counter. I waited for the book to change. For a long moment nothing happened but the clock hand scraping forward and Mr. Hale describing the sequence of his afternoon. Then a new line slid into the page where the previous sentence had been, erasing and replacing with clean ink. "Evelyn keeps the brass key." A man asks for help finding a ledger. Ada steps away to answer a call and is delayed. My breath came short. Suspicion twisted into anger. "Ada," I said, walking back to the desk with my collar turned up. "It wrote that I keep the key. It wrote that you will step away. Why would the book make that exact move?" Ada's hands folded. "Because it writes conditions that force choices," she said. "It writes the next knot in the day. It does not matter whether you keep the key or lay it down. It will set the stage around you." Her fingers brushed the silver bookmark at her throat. "When I was younger, I thought I could refuse. I think you can refuse. But the ledger appears, the phone rings, an elderly patron trips. These are things the book can arrange. You forced it once. You may force it again." A new external event arrived. Mr. Hale stood suddenly and said, "There are pages missing." Someone tore them out. He spread his hands and the ledger lay small and bare on the counter like a body without a name. The library filled with the concrete consequences of that sentence written minutes before. Ada moved immediately to help the man. The motion left the desk unattended for a heartbeat. I had a choice then. Place the key on the counter as the original line had said, or keep it hidden and step into the gap Ada left. I took a breath and moved to the reading room instead. I volunteered to search the returns shelf for the red binding. Ada's eyes met mine over the counter and held a question in them. "Evelyn," she said, "find the ledger. If you go looking, remember to be practical. Call for the town clerk if you must." I left the counter because the book named a motion I had not made, and because I needed to test whether following or refusing changed anything beyond immediate convenience. While I scanned spines, I felt the notebook's presence like a heat in the desk where it lay open. Pages settling, edges slightly raised as if breathing. I found the red, bound ledger behind a dictionary and handed it back to Mr. Hale. He clutched it as if it were spoken proof. Outside the reading room window, a rain shard hit the glass and left a clean line. Another small event. When I returned, the notebook had a new line. It read, "Evelyn keeps the brass key. Mr. Hale leaves with his ledger. Ada returns late and speaks to no one. A consequence that matters will thereafter be asked of Evelyn." The phrase made my hands go cold. The book had escalated. It had taken my refusal and converted it into a different demand. The emotion that had begun as suspicion had moved to anger. Now anger slid into a tight, urgent fear. I stood in front of Ada. "Ada, this is escalating." It replaced the first line with something worse. "What did you mean about yielding?" I kept my voice clipped. I wanted words that would stay lodged in the ledger of the room. Ada's shoulders dropped. "When I was 27, she said, "I followed a line that promised to keep someone safe. I handed a key to a man because the page said so. I thought the action would be simple. It cost me a daughter I had not yet met." Her voice held a detail that snapped the room into focus. "A name that she would not give, a date she would not say. I will not lose another person," she added. We argued then, not with flared epithets, but with a quick exchange of short sentences. I said, "Isn't hiding the book an option?" "Ada, we tried. It returns." "It will name another way in," I said. "It writes people into motion, Ada. It writes consequences. It writes price the back and forth had the exact tension required by the rules of our living experiment." 3 quick, clipped responses, each forcing the other to adjust. Outside the window, rain made a slow patter against the panes. Inside, our voices shaped the next scene. A deliberate test followed. I decided to perform a direct, visible defiance, to take the page the notebook named and tear it free. If the book could predict or require action, then making an irreparable gesture might break that pattern. I told Ada my plan. "You can't," she said. "You would make it worse." I said, "I am done letting it name what I do. I will choose." She walked to the desk and put her hand flat on the open page, as if to feel the ink's temperature. "Evelyn, you must understand the cost." When I once tore a page away, the page's words moved and found another way. The ledger tore in my hands. A child stopped coming. Her confession shifted the power between us. Where suspicion had driven me, trust in my own agency tried to push back. Where Eda's past fear controlled her caution, my impatience pushed toward directness. The emotional balance moved again. Suspicion, anger, fear, resolve. We set a deliberate plan. I would try to hold the key and refuse to lay it down while we kept the reading room under steady observation. Ada agreed to stay at the counter without leaving and to call no one unless I gave the word. She would physically hold the ledger in front of her to anchor the moment. The plan required her cooperation. It shifted more responsibility onto Ada than anyone else. She nodded once and said, "If this fails, I will do what I can to protect Mr. Hale." "I will not." She stopped herself. The ledger thudded on the desk. Almost at midnight, a new external interruption came. A woman hurried in, soaked from the rain, clutching a small parcel and asking, "Is the library still open? I need help finding records of a house sale from last year." Her presence pushed the night forward and complicated our experiment. She had a name tag in her coat, but I did not ask it. She set the parcel on the circulation desk and leaned her forehead on her knuckles. Ada stood and moved to help the woman. "I'll check the archives for you," she said. Her shoulders went taut as she walked away. I saw the moment she crossed the threshold of the reading room and felt my plan unravel. The notebook had been right twice. It named a configuration that made choice difficult. I clamped my jaw shut and remembered Ada's face when she spoke of losing something because she had obeyed a page. I moved instead toward the hearth, side reading alcove where the notebook's binding caught the flame light. At the table, I sat facing the open book. The sentence on the page was not a question. It was a proposition and a whisper at once. I reached forward and tore the leaf free. The paper gave with a wet, quick sound. Ada lunged across the room and then stopped as if some invisible script had told her to freeze. I flung the page toward the hearth and the scrap asked in the lamplight. The action was violent and precise. The book answered without a pause. Ink flowed on the next page, a new sentence assembling into the same pattern and with my action folded inside. The new line read, "Evelyn rips the specified page free and flings it toward the hearth. Ada lunges to stop her. The notebook reforms a line that describes the rip itself. My hand went cold. The torn page smoldered at the hearth's edge but did not catch. The notebook had taken my attempt at defiance and made that defiance part of its script. The climax arrived in one instant, and it registered in my bones. Ada's movement was not theatrical. She crossed the space between us in 2 strides and tried to catch my arm. "Evelyn, stop." She said stop. Her voice had a break in it I had never heard before. I heard the clap of the torn paper as it hit the hearthstone and then slid into a small curl. Ash dusted the table like a thin grey rain. We argued in a rapid exchange. I said, "Ada, you saw that." I saw it. I feared it. "I did not stop you because I thought I had no right." I said, "What right do you have to decide?" "Ada, I have the ledger of what happens next. I have seen what happens when I refuse. I have seen what it takes." The confrontation had 5 quick lines traded between us, breathless and urgent, each sentence short and like a step. After the page fell and settled, the book lay open and neat. A new line had formed, not about the rip, but about what followed. Ash settles on the table, and the notebook bears a calm new line acknowledging Evelyn's action and naming a small, ambiguous consequence. My throat tightened without a metaphor. The consequence the page named was a concrete instruction. Return a photograph to a drawer beneath the circulation ledger, and a voice will come back into the town's conversation. Ada looked at me and then at the page. "It names a price," she said. "It asks for something in return." Her hands trembled. My fingers found the brass key in the pocket of my coat as if their purpose had returned. The emotion shifted again, anger cooling into a wary calculation. We understood the stakes concretely. The page demanded restitution of a tangible object, or else it would exact another cost from someone we both knew in the town. We resolved the immediate action with practical steps. Ada opened the ledger drawer and pried beneath the false bottom where she kept an envelope of small-town notices. She found a photograph wrapped in brown paper that had belonged to someone whose name Ada had avoided saying all night. She slid it out with care and set it on the counter. Every motion was deliberate, her fingers steady, my thumb rubbing the key's edge. The woman who had come in the rain watched us and said nothing. Mr. Hale had returned to the counter, his ledger closed, his posture unsure. Ada lifted the photograph as if it weighed more than paper. "This was taken once a year," she said. "I removed it because I thought it would keep them safe." The book asked me then. I gave it up and I lost what I could not name. "Ada," I said, "then let us return it where it belongs and see if the book accepts the act without demand." We moved as a small team. The evidence of our earlier days was slotted in a drawer beneath the circulation ledger. I unlatched the drawer and felt the brass key in my palm. The room's morning light had not yet arrived, but behind the tall windows a faint grey threatened the horizon. The external clocked event of dawn approached. Ada set the photograph into the drawer and slid it shut. The book's page changed again. Ada returns the photograph. The notebook records the act. The library stands intact. A small, ambiguous consequence is named. An old rumor restarts in town about the ledger. The sentence read like a ledger entry. It named something concrete and yet intangible. A rumor would pick up. The book had a way of translating action into social motion. We breathed and the fear pulled back into a steady H. Ada rested her palm on the counter and exhaled. "I thought we could bury it forever," she said, "but it adapts. It will always find language." I held the brass key and the weight of the moment in my other hand. I had wanted to defy the book. Instead, I had negotiated with it. Mr. Hale stood and reached for his ledger. "Thank you," he said to both of us. "You found it?" He left without more questions. The woman who had come in the rain gathered her parcel and left too. The library doors closed on the sounds of their footsteps. Outside, the rain slowed into a steady mist. We sat then and catalogued what remained. Ada confessed a final detail. When she had once yielded, she'd not only handed over a key, but also answered a question the page asked in the wrong way. Her misplaced answer had changed a child's placement in a care register. The regret was a fact she could not reverse. "I cannot fix that," she said. "I can only make sure I do not answer wrongly again." I placed the brass key on the counter then, not because the book had told me to, but because the room demanded a certainty. The key sat there between us, the ridged tooth pointing toward the ledger drawer. Ada watched it as if she were making a catalogue entry. "Evelyn," she said, leave it in the drawer, lock it away. We will both sign the ledger and bind this page in the chain trunk. We took the practical steps we could. Ada fetched a small metal trunk from beneath her desk, one she'd kept for documents that belonged to the town rather than to us. We wrapped the torn paper with cloth, slid it into the trunk along with the photograph, and fastened a chain around it. I turned the brass key over to Ada. She placed it on the trunk lid and clicked the tiny padlock into place. Its sound was precise and final. When the lock snapped, the notebook lay on the desk and formed a final line on the topmost page. The trunk closes. Ash settles on the table. Ada and Evelyn exchange a quiet, altered understanding. The library stands intact, but the question of freedom remains unresolved. The sentence contained an admission and a limitation. It did not promise peace. It named an altered understanding, and in doing so it anchored our lives to a fact. We had chosen action together and in consequence accepted a cost. The emotional arc that had begun with suspicion ended in a practical, uneasy acceptance. Ada put the trunk beneath the counter and slid the ledger over it. She closed the ledger and ran her fingertip along the margin where we had signed our names and written the date. "We will log what we can," she said. "We will warn those who come. We will refuse to be the only ones who know how to answer." Her voice held a plan. Not a grand philosophical victory, but a series of small, enforceable steps. I left the brass key in the lock on the trunk and did not take it back. My hand trembled when I walked toward the front door. I looked once at Ada. "Ada," I said, "if you ever need to tell me the full story, I will listen." She nodded once, a small motion packed with all of her careful kindness. At dawn the lamps went low and the rain stopped. A strip of pale light found the stacks. I closed the circulation desk and turned the brass key in the drawer a single time, then slid the drawer closed and set the desk bell neatly in the center of the counter. The locks in the little trunk clinked. Ada latched the front door and turned the key twice. The sound carried down the stair and out into the street. I left the library without the notebook. Ada kept it under the ledger folded into its chain. The final concrete action, the trunk held closed, the key turned in the drawer, the door latched, sealed our choices for now. We had not solved the book's origin. We had not smashed its power or proven whether it predicted or demanded. We had, however, named consequences, acted together, and made practical arrangements to limit harm. When the dawn landed on the town square, I walked away with wet shoes and the knowledge of what we had done. Ada watched me go from the window, the ledger drawer shut, the trunk beneath the counter. The last image I kept before I reached the street was Ada's hand on the trunk's handle, the key turned once more in the lock. That single mechanical click marked a decision we both acknowledged. I did not know whether the notebook would wait or find another way. I only knew that tonight we had held a chain, a key, and a ledger against the book's lines. The cost remained named on the desk in ink. The library stood intact. Ada shut the lights. The keys slid into their pockets, and she locked the glass door with the same steady motion she used when she closed for storms. The turn of the lock echoed in my chest as I walked away, and the town took me back into its morning routines.